They thought she was just another black woman alone on a porch until her military dogs stepped into the light. 6 police officers had surrounded Jade Walker's farmhouse at sunrise, weapons drawn, voices barking conflicting commands. She stood completely still, hands visible, eyes locked on the lead officer, Captain Reynolds, whose smirk radiated arrogance and something darker. The red clay of the South Carolina driveway crunched under boots as they closed in. "You're resisting!" one officer shouted. "Step aside or we'll make you!" Jade didn't move. The morning air was humid, heavy with tension. Then, with one slow breath, she gave a low, sharp whistle. A silence dropped like a curtain. From behind her screen door, 2 forms emerged. Tall, precise, silent. Sierra and Titan. Belgian Malinois. Former Special Operations K-9S. Their tactical vests gleamed with worn insignia and Velcro-mounted gear. Sierra's amber eyes scanned the perimeter. Titan's massive frame planted like a wall in front of Jade. The officers froze. "Whoa, those aren't pets," one murmured. Another took a full step back, hand hovering near his weapon, but uncertain now. Captain Reynolds' expression twitched. Not fear exactly, but recognition. "Are those military?" he said, more to himself than anyone else. Jade's voice was calm, unshaken. "They're trained to neutralize threats. You're giving them practice." Nobody laughed. For 10 full seconds, no one spoke. The balance had shifted. These weren't animals reacting emotionally. They were assets, reading body language, measuring intent, awaiting one command. The air sizzled with the possibility of escalation, but neither dog advanced. They held formation, controlled, focused. The same discipline that had saved American soldiers in Kandahar was now holding a line in rural South Carolina. But how did it come to this? Why had law enforcement turned up at Jade Walker's door in full force with no warrant and no cause? Let's go back. Jade Walker hadn't always lived behind fences and silence. But after 15 years in the Marine Special Operations Command, silence was the only thing she trusted. At 38, she had traded combat zones for 5 acres of peaceful land tucked behind the pine curtain of rural South Carolina. A modest white farmhouse, rows of vegetables, 2 dogs she trusted more than most people. Her neighbors kept their distance, and that was fine with her. Jade didn't need welcome baskets or block parties. She needed peace. But peace, as it turns out, doesn't last long when you're a black veteran in a town that still whispers about good families and who belongs where. She'd learned to ignore the sideways glances. The bank manager who asked 3 times if she was sure about the farm loan. The grocery clerk who followed her through the store but never made eye contact. The sheriff's cruiser that sat idling outside her gate more than once a week. Still, she carried on. Morning runs, with Sierra and Titan by her side, digging her hands into soil that felt more honest than the world beyond her fence line. But what nobody knew, what none of the folks in Willow Creek could see, was what lived behind Jade's quiet demeanor. She wasn't just a veteran. She had been deep in the worst of it. Recon, counterinsurgency, asset extraction. She'd trained dogs that saved entire platoons. She could disarm a man twice her size and remain calm through mortar fire. But none of that stopped the postmaster from asking if she was help when she picked up a package. She laughed it off, until one morning when 3 cruisers barreled down her gravel road, lights flashing like it was a drug bust. No warrant, no explanation, just badges and attitude. Jade didn't panic. She stood at her garden gate, dirt still on her gloves, and watched them step out like they owned the place. That was when she knew. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a message. Someone wanted to make an example of her, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. If you've ever felt the burn of being judged before anyone knows your story, stay with this one. If you believe that dignity should never come second to power, Don't go anywhere. And if you've ever wanted to see someone stand their ground with nothing but truth, training, and 2 loyal dogs, you need to hear how this unfolds. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next, because what starts as harassment will soon explode into a nationwide reckoning. Jade didn't pick this fight, but she sure as hell wasn't going to lose it. It started with dust rising off the gravel road and the low rumble of tires coming fast. Jade looked up from her tomato plants just as 3 police cruisers skidded to a halt at the edge of her driveway. Doors flung open. Boots hit the ground. No sirens, no greetings. Just hard eyes behind sunglasses and stiff hands resting near weapons. She wiped the dirt from her gloves slowly, deliberately, as 6 uniformed officers began spreading out like they were sweeping a perimeter. No one said a word at first, which told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't a wellness check. This was a message. A tall officer with a sharp jaw and cold eyes stepped forward. Captain James Reynolds. She recognized the name. More complaints against him than commendations, most of them quietly dismissed. "Ms. Walker," he said with a smile that felt more like a warning, "we've had reports of suspicious activity on this property. We're just here to take a look around." Jade kept her voice steady. "Suspicious by whose standards?" The smile vanished. "Ma'am, we're not looking for trouble, unless you give us a reason." She glanced at the others. They were fanning out, moving toward her garden, her shed, her barn. One officer kicked over her basket of vegetables without a word. Another reached for the latch on her fence. "Do you have a warrant?" Jade asked calmly. Silence. "I didn't think so." Reynolds stepped closer, his voice dropping. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." And there it was, the script, the trap, vague accusations, no documentation, just intimidation. Jade knew better than to escalate, but she also knew her rights. "You're on private property without a warrant," she said. "That makes this unlawful." The air shifted. The younger officer, his badge said Bennett, looked uncertain, his eyes darting between Reynolds and Jade. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. The others didn't hesitate. They were already moving through her land like they owned it. And Jade, standing alone at the center of it all, realized she wasn't just being watched. She was being set up. But they had no idea what was waiting behind that front door. Keep listening. It only gets more dangerous from here. Jade didn't flinch. Her breath slowed. Her stance shifted just slightly. Shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning each movement like a battlefield commander. Years of combat had trained her not to react with panic, but with precision. While Reynolds barked orders and officers strutted through her yard, Jade's fingers moved calmly to her watch. One quick press on the side button sent a silent signal to Sierra and Titan. Remain hidden. Stay alert. Inside the house, the dogs would now be fully locked in, watching through the windows, every muscle ready. She didn't need to shout commands. These weren't backyard pets. They were military-grade sentinels. Her second move was to slip her hand into her pocket, where a small audio recorder clicked on. She never dealt with local law enforcement without it anymore. Not after what happened last year at the grocery store, when officers tried to corner a teenager until Jade stepped in and filmed everything. That recording had gone all the way to the county board. And Reynolds? He hadn't forgotten. As the officers made their way toward her garden shed, Jade's eyes caught a flicker of motion, a quick hand reaching into a jacket, then into her storage bin. She saw it. So did Sierra. Through the upstairs window, the dog's ears lifted, body frozen like a coiled spring. Something had been planted. Jade didn't react outwardly. That was the point. These men wanted her to be angry, wanted her to shout. Instead, she turned back to Reynolds, voice even. "Captain, your officers are trespassing, destroying property, and operating without a warrant. You know that's a problem." Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "You're threatening me, Ms. Walker?" She didn't blink. "I'm reminding you that I know the law." The tension sharpened. But Jade had already calculated her next 5 moves. This wasn't chaos. This was choreography. And she was leading it. Reynolds was done pretending. His smile dropped as he ordered his men to check everything. A thinly veiled excuse to tear through her property. 2 officers moved toward the house, one heading straight for the porch steps. Jade held her ground. "You are not entering my home without a warrant," she said firmly, her voice rising with the command tone she hadn't used since Afghanistan. Reynolds stepped closer, face tight with manufactured outrage. "You just raised your voice to an officer," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You all heard that. Threatening behavior." The officers nodded like a chorus. Jade knew this tactic well. Create a narrative, build an excuse, provoke a reaction, then call it resisting. But she gave them nothing. Her hands remained at her sides, her posture calm. Inside her pocket, the recorder was still running. She looked over Reynolds' shoulder just in time to see the officer who had planted something in her shed giving a subtle nod. The plan was moving fast now. They weren't here to search. They were here to destroy, discredit, humiliate. But Jade was already 2 steps ahead. Her security cameras had picked up every movement, every violation. Footage was being backed up remotely, and her alert system had already triggered the next part of her protocol. Across the county, her lawyer had just received a full alert packet. And more importantly, so had the local news. Reynolds didn't notice the white van until its tires crunched up the gravel. A young reporter stepped out, camera in hand. "Channel 7 News," she called. "We got a tip about police presence at a veterans' home. Mind explaining why 6 officers are on private property without a warrant?" Reynolds turned red, motioning to block her view. But the camera was already rolling. And Jade, still silent, still unshaken, looked directly at the lens. "Would you like to see what they just put in my shed?" she asked. The officers paused. Bennett looked away. The moment of control they thought they had, it was gone. Jade hadn't resisted. She had documented it. And now the whole world was about to watch them unravel. Keep listening. The next move will change everything. Reynolds took 1 step too close. His hand brushed the top of his holster, a move meant to intimidate. "Step aside now," he growled, "or I'll consider you a threat." The moment shattered something in the air. Jade didn't flinch. Instead, she gave a single sharp whistle, short, clear, and unmistakable. It cut through the tension like a blade. All eyes turned toward the farmhouse. The screen door creaked open. Out stepped Sierra first, ears high, eyes locked. Titan followed, muscular, deliberate, every inch of him alert and ready. Both dogs wore black tactical vests lined with reinforced Kevlar, small American flags stitched across the sides. The insignia beneath read, United States Marine Corps K-9 Unit. The shift was instant. Every officer's hand froze mid-reach. Their formation faltered. One of them whispered, "Are those military?" But it was Officer Bennett who finally said it out loud. "Captain, those are federal assets, special operations." Jade's voice was steady. "They're trained to hold position, unless given a different command." Sierra moved to Jade's right flank, Titan to her left. Neither growled, neither barked. They didn't need to. Their stillness spoke louder than noise. These weren't pets. They were professionals. And every officer standing there knew it. Reynolds stepped back, jaw clenched. His authority, once blaring, now shrank beneath the weight of what he'd triggered. "Control your animals," he said. But it lacked force now, sounded more like a plea than a threat. "They're already controlled," Jade replied, her gaze sharp. "More than I can say for your men." The silence that followed was thick, charged, unmistakably dangerous. But this time, not for Jade. For the first time, she held the power. And everyone on that gravel driveway felt it. If you're still listening, don't stop now. Like this story, share it, and hit subscribe to X Daily Stories. Because what happens next will turn this confrontation into a national scandal and reveal a secret network that's been watching, waiting, and ready to strike back against corruption. A new vehicle rolled up, its siren silent, but lights flashing. A county sheriff's cruiser. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, tall, calm, with the kind of presence that made everyone take a step back. His boots crunched the gravel as he took in the scene. 6 town officers on private property with no warrant, a news reporter filming freely, and 2 military working dogs standing in perfect formation beside a black veteran. His eyes narrowed as they locked onto Reynolds. "Captain," he said flatly, "please explain what the hell I'm looking at." Reynolds straightened, trying to recover his posture. "We had reports of suspicious activity, just following up." Daniels scanned the area, saw no paperwork in anyone's hands. "Do you have a warrant?" Silence. That silence said everything. Then Daniels turned to Jade. "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry. Do you mind if we speak privately?" But before Jade could answer, the young reporter stepped in, voice crisp and camera steady. "Sheriff, are you confirming this is an unauthorized search?" Before he could speak, another alert buzzed on Jade's phone. Her system had just triggered a live upload to both her lawyer and an encrypted news feed. Then came the twist. A slow-moving pair of pickup trucks turned off the main road and parked along the tree line. Inside them, veterans, friends of Jade, men and women from her support network. No weapons, no signs, just presence. It was all they needed, and the message was clear. She wasn't alone. Tension crackled in the air, the kind you feel just before a storm breaks. And trust us, the storm hasn't even started. So don't go anywhere. What you're about to hear will peel back layers of corruption and reveal a battle far bigger than one woman on her porch. Stay with us. It's only just begun. The real danger came long after the cameras left and the sun dipped below the pine trees. It was after midnight when Jade stirred from light sleep, her instincts snapping her awake like a tripwire. Sierra's ears perked first, then Titan lifted his head. Silent, alert. Jade moved to the window, her fingers already on the tablet that controlled her security system. What she saw made her blood run cold. 5 figures, dressed in black, creeping along the tree line behind her house. No lights, no sound. Just slow, deliberate movement. One held what looked like a gas can. Another had a crowbar. Jade zoomed in with night vision. Masks, gloves, tactical approach. Not just a threat. This was an operation. One of the shadows moved like Reynolds. Another she recognized as Officer Delaney. The rest? Probably hired muscle. Jade didn't hesitate. She activated the sprinkler system. Not to put out flames, but to disrupt their movement, make the ground slick, and confuse the timing. Then, with a whisper only the dogs could hear, she gave the command. Sierra and Titan moved like ghosts, out the side entrance, looping around the house with trained precision. Within seconds, they had flanked the intruders. Titan took the man with the gas can, bringing him down with a calculated takedown maneuver, fast and clean. Sierra circled wide, her presence invisible until she barked once, a sharp sound that froze every man in place. Jade stepped out from the shadows, her voice loud and firm. "Federal agents are already on this case. Drop your weapons now." Flashlights from the veteran watch team lit up the night. From the driveway, headlights cut through the dark as Officer Bennett's car skidded to a halt. He was bleeding, his shirt torn. "They came to my house," he shouted, voice shaking. "Said I'd pay for testifying. I had to get my wife and baby out." The masked men hesitated. Then Sierra moved in closer and panic set in. They ran, but they didn't get far. Veterans closed in from every angle. Within minutes, it was over. But what did they try to do? That was just the beginning of their downfall. Keep listening. Justice was about to wake up. By sunrise, the story had shifted from intimidation to investigation. FBI agents were already on site, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing Jade's security footage. The gas can, the masked break-in, the attack on Officer Bennett, all captured, time-stamped, and backed up. Reynolds and Delaney were taken into federal custody before breakfast. Charges included conspiracy, attempted arson, assault, and obstruction of justice. Sheriff Daniels stood beside Jade as agents logged evidence from the shed, including the item planted earlier, now tied directly to Delaney's fingerprints. What had started as a suspicious activity call had unraveled into a criminal conspiracy stretching deep into the Willow Creek Police Department. And the motive? Land. Jade's property bordered a proposed luxury resort development. Multiple minority landowners in the area had experienced similar pressure, harassment, code violations, intimidation tactics. Officer Bennett, shaken but resolute, handed over text messages and recordings proving Reynolds had called it clearing the area. But it wasn't just about one town. The FBI's Civil Rights Division confirmed this tactic had been used in other counties. Jade's case opened the floodgates. The footage aired nationally. News anchors asked how many others have been forced off their land with a badge and a threat. Jade didn't smile when they took Reynolds away. She didn't need to. Her truth had held. Her dogs had held. And now the law was finally holding the ones who abused it. But stay with this story. Because what Jade does next, it's not just about justice. It's about rebuilding everything they tried to tear down. 6 months later, Jade stood on the courthouse steps, not in uniform, not in chains, but in purpose. Sierra and Titan sat at attention beside her as former Captain Reynolds was led past in handcuffs, his head down, his power gone. Behind Jade stood veterans, community leaders, reporters, and neighbors, people who once stayed silent now standing tall. Her land, once a target, had become a sanctuary. She'd turned part of it into a training center for service dogs and a safe haven for veterans facing injustice. Officer Bennett now worked in community outreach, helping rebuild the department from the inside. Jade never asked for a spotlight, but when it found her, she used it. Not to punish, but to change. And this fight isn't over. If you believe in standing up, in protecting what's right, and in building something better from the ashes, subscribe to X Daily Stories, because Jade's story is just one of many, and the next one might be yours.